Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be chatting about the Canon 1V. I'm going to be sharing the different lenses that I use on it, specific film stocks that I use. It is a 35mm film camera. And just overall how I've incorporated it into my workflow. So I'm excited to share that with you guys. Hopefully you'll learn lots. So stay tuned and we'll get right into it. First, I'm just going to chat a little bit about the camera for those that are new to the Canon 1V. So there are a few steps below the Canon 1V. I believe there's the EOS 3 and another one that's just below that. The 1V is the most expensive one, so I think it's around 600 Canadian dollars. The benefit of getting the 1V is that you have really great autofocus. This camera is really easy to use for a 35mm film camera, so if you're wanting to jump into film but you don't want to jump to medium format yet, getting the Canon 1V would be a great starter camera to start testing out film. It feels very much like a digital camera, even if I turn on the shutter here. You can see that the shutter sounds very much like a digital camera, and it is also very fast, and I like that the autofocus works very well. So if I'm doing a family session and I want to shoot it all on film, it's nice having the Canon 1V for those faster moments where the kids are moving, they're running around, and being able to use that autofocus. It has a bunch of different focus points, so I can hit the grid up at the top and then choose the focus point so I can really make sure that I'm getting my subject in focus. Another great thing about getting the Canon 1V is that you'll get to use all of your Canon lenses on it. So even your Sigma Canon lenses, which is what I have on right now. I have a Sigma 35mm fine art Canon lens, and so I can use this lens on my 1V and any of the other lenses that I have for my Canon as well. So that is a huge benefit. I'm not stuck with one lens. I do get the option of interchangeable lenses and getting to use my current lenses. I did have the Contax G2 camera for a little while, which is a little point and shoot camera, a lot smaller than this one, but it takes 35mm film as well. And honestly, it's a really beautiful camera because it does have the Zeiss glass on it. But the downside is that I don't get to use my Canon lenses. So that was kind of the downside for me, was not getting to, have a variety of lenses to use on it. But otherwise, it was a really beautiful little camera, and it was a fun point and shoot. This one is a bit bigger, it is a bit heavier, so if you wear it around your neck on the wedding day, it does weigh you down. But to me, because I don't use it crazy often on a wedding day, it's fine for a couple rolls that I'll shoot on a wedding day. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about my favorite lens to use on this camera. So typically I almost always keep the 35mm lens that I have on here right now. And the reason for this is that I love using my 35mm film camera for more of those faster movement type shots. So I have my Contax, which all of you know, I have a Contax and a medium format, and those are really great for getting that beautiful depth of field. It's really shallow in the background, but I want to have more variety in my gallery, especially for the bride and groom portraits. It's nice to have a roll loaded in my Canon 1V, and then I can shoot that throughout the day, when we're moving, transitioning from one spot to the next. That is when I like to use my Canon 1V. Or if I'm pulling back, getting a wide landscape shot, maybe I want them small in the scenery, then this is a great option for that as well. I did just purchase a 24mm Sigma fine art lens, so I might start using that more than the 35 on this camera, just because I really love those wide perspectives. And again, adding something different to my galleries. I feel like for so long I was stuck on getting everything with that dreamy bokeh, but now I really want to add more of those fun moments and tell a story of the day. Bride and grooms want to see the full view of their wedding day. They just don't want close-ups or everything very soft focus. It's nice to shoot at f8 or f11 and get those shots that are fully in focus. My favorite film stock to shoot with this camera is probably Aperture 400, so that's what I have right here. And then I also like using some black and white film stocks as well. So I do have Tri-X 400 black and white film, which is really beautiful and pretty much the classic black and white. So when you think of black and white, this is the most common film stock, I would say. And it just has that really nice contrast, a little bit more grain, but overall beautiful deep blacks. And then I also use the Ilford HP5 Plus 400 ISO film, so that's another option. I think it has a little bit less grain than the Tri-X, also a little bit less contrasty, I feel like. But so I'll use both of these. I just have a bunch of the HP5 left over, but I'll probably be getting more of the Tri-X 400 in the future because it seems to be my favorite black and white out of these two. But both look great, and I like using the black and whites mostly for indoors. So this is when the bride's getting ready. I just feel like black and white tells a really beautiful story. And then I love putting in my Portra 400 when I'm doing outdoor shots. So if I'm getting venue shots, maybe wide shots of the venue, or when I'm shooting the couple during the bride and groom portraits, it's nice to have this loaded. I might only shoot 1 or 2 of these in a day, so I'm really using my shots sparingly. The nice part is that I am getting 36 shots on a roll, so I can just leave it in there throughout the day and shoot as I want. One other thing that I should mention is that I find the metering inside the camera is really accurate. So a lot of the times I rarely use a light meter when I'm shooting with my Canon 1V. I'll actually just go by what the meter inside the camera is telling me. Now, if we're outside and I'm already metering because I have my contacts, then I will just use that metering and put the exact one in my Canon 1V. But if I'm shooting in the morning when things are getting busy, we're rushing around, I don't have time to keep metering, then I will just go based off what the in-camera metering is telling me. And the images have always turned out great, especially for black and white film, when it is a bit more flexible and you don't need to be super accurate with those meterings. I do find that 35mm film likes to be exposed a little bit more than 120 film. So I don't know if that's just something that I've noticed or how I shoot, but I do notice that I like making sure that I expose the film at least 1 or 2 stops overexposed. So my favorite aperture to shoot with the Canon 1V is 4.0. or higher. So because I'm doing a lot of landscape shots, horizontal shots, and getting everything in focus, really trying to capture the movement and emotion of the day, I like shooting at higher apertures. So I find that 4.0 or 5.6 looks really beautiful, and I don't have to worry as much about getting it super crisp or super in focus when I have 5.6. I also love shooting with really low shutter speeds. I find that because I have a wide lens on this, I can go down to 1/15th of a second and sometimes just have a little bit of blur. So that is the nice part about shooting with a 35mm lens on this camera and it being a bit faster and lighter than the medium format, is that I can shoot at lower shutter speeds and not have as much movement. But that being said, I do like shooting at 1/15th or below that to really get some of that blur in the image and create a story throughout the day. So a couple other things I want to add is that when I'm shooting this on the wedding day, I try to follow pretty close behind if I'm getting movement shots of the bride and groom. I find that if you just stand really far back and get a shot of them walking, you don't get the same effect as if you were cropped in really close following them from behind and actually see a bit of that movement in their body and in the gown. So I do like sticking really close for getting those movement shots, but of course if I want a wide shot with them in the scenery or a venue shot, then I'll step back for that. I should mention that I also don't love shooting this in direct sunlight. Because it's 35mm film, I just find that it doesn't handle the highlights as well as medium format. So if I shoot in direct sunlight, then I do notice that the highlights get a little bit blown out and there's that ring light that kind of comes around them, which I don't love. So I'll show some examples of that. But I try not to shoot too much in direct sunlight for that reason. So I really use this camera when it's overcast or when it's close to sunset, specifically indoors. Again, I love shooting it for the getting ready parts with black and white. So I really feel that this camera shines and I'm shooting indoors black and white for those getting ready portraits. So quickly, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the benefits of shooting 35mm film and the cons of shooting 35mm film compared to medium format. So the benefits are that you get 36 shots on a roll. With medium format, you're only getting 16 shots, so you're a lot more intentional with each shot. But with this camera, you get 36 frames, so you get to shoot a bit more, and it's a little bit more cost effective since you're getting more shots on a roll. The only downside of that is that you can't change out rolls as quickly, so sometimes in the morning shooting 36 frames of black and white can be a bit tough to squeeze that all in, especially if we only have 30 or 40 minutes during the getting ready. So I do find myself firing a bit more unintentional and not really caring as much because I need to finish that roll. But it is nice when I get the color in there, because then it's going to last throughout the day and I know that I have all day to shoot the Portra 400. But that is kind of the downside, is just having to wait so long before you change out your film roll. But again, that's mostly for a wedding day if you're like me and you want to shoot different film stocks and not just black and white. The other downside is that there is noticeably more grain than medium format. You will notice that you'll have to bring it into Lightroom, maybe increase the luminance and increase the sharpness and get rid of some of that grain, whereas medium format is really good at minimizing the grain because it is larger negatives. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And then lastly, you are getting less depth of field. I mean, if you do obviously put an 85mm lens on here, of course you're gonna get more depth of field, but you're still not getting that medium format look. So even with, you know, the contacts in the 80mm, which is equivalent to a 50mm, you get that beautiful depth of field in the background. With this camera, even with the 50mm, it's gonna look very similar to digital depth of field. So you're not gonna get the medium format look, but you'll get the filmed colors. And that's the benefit of shooting with this, is that you'll still get to shoot film and start to understand the colors, start to understand what metering you like for specific film stocks, and of course that'll transition over to shooting medium format if that's something you want to move towards. Lastly, I would say if you're wondering when you should move 35mm to medium format, it really is just preference. Of course, if you want that bokeh and that medium format depth of field, then move right away to the Mamiya or the contacts to get that. But if you just want beautiful images, beautiful colors, then 35mm film will do the trick for you. Just remember that I wouldn't specifically use 35mm film for really important shots on a wedding day or client work unless I was getting them scanned very large, because again, you won't get as big of a resolution on the 35mm film that you will get with medium format. With the medium format, you are getting bigger resolution images that compare to your digitals. So that's just one thing to think about. Maybe only use this for portrait shoots. If you're shooting portraits on a wedding day, make sure to get those large film scans, especially if they're important shots, because I'm just using it for more movement and fun type of shots. I don't mind that they're lower resolution files. So I highly recommend looking into the Canon 1V, especially if you have all the Canon lenses, and this is probably the best 35mm film that you can get. Obviously, if you're with a different brand, Nikon has great 35mm cameras. There's so many different little cameras to look at. Well, I hope that this video was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, make sure to put them below. If you have any ideas for my next video, I would love to hear that as well. I do plan on making more videos about digital cameras, since I did just buy the GFX 50S version 2, so I'm excited to share my thoughts on that once I get my hands on it. But stay tuned for lots more videos. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.